just like seeing her for the first time.
Lien, Yu's face twisted in anger, veins bulging visibly around his eyes as his temper exploded. He glared at Luang, his voice trembling with fury as he demanded what exactly Luang meant by his words. His pride would not allow such an insult to pass. Pointing his finger sharply at Luang, his voice echoed across the room like a threat carved in stone. He swore that he would kill Luang for daring to call him a mere sheep. But Luang didn't even flinch. His calm eyes revealed not a shred of fear or hesitation. He took a deliberate step forward, and in that instant, strange pink orbs began dropping from the ceiling, one after another, bouncing lightly before rolling across the floor. The sudden phenomenon startled Line, who instinctively stepped back in shock. Yet Luang's expression remained composed, his gaze sharp and unshaken as he calmly observed the mysterious spheres. Before their very eyes, the pink balls began shifting and merging, transforming into something terrifying. Their shape twisted, their surface gleamed, and within moments they had assembled into the towering figure of a giant puppet. Its sheer size cast a long shadow across the hall, filling the space with a heavy, oppressive aura. Even the arrogant Lin, Shu, who until now had been sneering and mocking, froze in disbelief. His arrogance faltered as he muttered under his breath, wondering if the people running this training camp were truly trying to kill them. The realization struck everyone at once. Even the weakest of these giant mechanical puppets could match the strength of an official rank 1 martial artist. The air in the room thickened with tension as the other participants, one by one, exchanged nervous glances. Fear began to creep into their hearts, their confidence wavering. Questions spread through their minds. What were they supposed to do now? How could they possibly fight such a thing? Luang, however, remained thoughtful. He recalled from his knowledge that mechanical puppets could be programmed with countless high-level martial arts techniques, making them incredibly versatile. A top-grade mechanical puppet, he knew, could rival even a rank 4 martial artist. But the cost of creating such a puppet was astronomical, far higher than simply nurturing a human martial artist to that level. Still, standing before the puppet, Luang felt an odd sense of awe. This was the first time he had seen a mechanical puppet in reality rather than in theory, and even in its menacing form, he couldn't help but feel impressed. Meanwhile, Line continued mocking him, belittling Luang as if he were nothing more than an insect standing before a giant. The arrogant youth even questioned if Luang was truly human, scoffing as he revealed that once the puppet was activated, it would immediately attack any living being that approached its range. The atmosphere turned colder. Everyone knew that grade 1 mechanical puppets were crafted from a special alloy, their fists harder and tougher than any ordinary weapon. One of the onlookers, a guy dressed in blue, narrowed his eyes and sneered. To him, Luang didn't even seem like he had reached the level of a rank 1 martial artist. With a mocking tone, he predicted that Luang would be crushed the moment he received a single punch from the puppet. Nearby, a blonde girl watched anxiously, her hands tightening at her sides. Her worry for Luang overcame her arrogance, and she couldn't stop herself from shouting desperately, "Watch out!" The puppet's massive arm swung forward, its metallic fist cutting through the air with a sharp, terrifying whistle. The ground trembled beneath its weight as it aimed directly at Luang's head. Smoke and dust billowed from the sheer force, and the air split with the sound of an incoming storm. Lin Shou grinned with twisted satisfaction, covering his face with his arm to shield himself from the debris, fully expecting Luang to be smashed to pieces. But what followed shattered their expectations. Luang did not move. He did not flinch. Instead, he stood firm, his expression unchanging as his hand rose slowly, almost casually. And then he blocked it. With nothing more than a single hand, Luang stopped the massive mechanical fist in its tracks. The ground vibrated violently from the impact, cracks spreading outward like spiderwebs beneath his feet. Yet Luang's stance was unshaken, his body as steady as a mountain. Gasps of disbelief erupted all around. The arrogant onlookers froze, their jaws dropping in shock. With a calm, almost mocking tone, Luang asked, Is that all you've got?" Before anyone could respond, he tightened his grip around the puppet's fist. Veins bulged along his hand, power radiating through his arm as he clenched down harder and harder until, with a loud metallic crunch, the puppet's fist shattered under his grip. Sparks flew, fragments clattered onto the floor. Not stopping there, Lu Wang's figure blurred with speed. He lifted the enormous puppet as though it were weightless, his fingers clutching it tightly. With a swift motion, he hurled the giant upwards, smashing it against the ceiling. The resounding crash echoed like thunder, shaking the entire chamber. Every participant stood frozen, wide-eyed, their minds struggling to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The same question repeated silently in their thoughts: was Lu even human? At that moment, an arrogant youth among them, Lienu's grandfather, forced out a laugh. He scratched his head awkwardly, pretending to be unfazed. With exaggerated confidence, he explained that these puppets weren't real rank 1 grade models at all, but just trash designed to look intimidating. He claimed that no one would pass the exam if the instructors truly unleashed genuine rank 1 puppets on them, pointing arrogantly at Lu Wang. He insisted there was no way someone like him, a so-called piece of trash, could ever withstand a true mechanical puppet. But the participants were no longer convinced. They had witnessed Luang's feat with their own eyes. Doubt spread through the crowd, leaving the arrogant youth red-faced. Realizing he had lost their trust, he spat insults at them, calling them idiots for believing in Lu Wang. Still, determined to save face, he pushed past the others and challenged the puppets himself. Lin Yu, puffed up with arrogance, stepped forward with great bravado. His body tensed as he leaped into the air, spinning with exaggerated flair. With a loud shout, he unleashed a flying kick aimed directly at the puppet's head. His confidence was so overwhelming that even his arrogant comrade cheered him on, convinced that the puppets were nothing but fakes. Landing on the puppet's head, Lin Shou spread his arms wide, grinning with triumph. "See, I told you, these things are just junk," he declared proudly. But his celebration was cut short. The puppet, unfazed, immediately swung its massive arm and slammed its iron fist directly into his face. The impact was brutal, sending his body crashing into the wall with bone-rattling force. He slid down in a twisted, almost comedic pose, resembling a street performer, frozen, mid-dance, as his face pressed awkwardly against the wall. The hall fell silent for a moment, then filled with muffled gasps and disbelief. Lin Shu, his arrogance now shattered, cursed under his breath as the painful truth struck him. These puppets weren't grade 1 at all. They were actually grade 2 level mechanical puppets, far stronger, far deadlier. The puppet that had punched him tilted its head slightly, as if confused by what it had done. It wasn't truly scratching its head, but rather adjusting its own mechanical joints. Yet the eerie movement made it look almost human. The guy in blue rushed forward, catching his battered comrade, whose swollen face now resembled a pair of round apples. Meanwhile, the blonde girl's gaze drifted once more to Lu Wang. Her heart pounded as she asked herself the same question she had asked before. What exactly was his rank? If Lu Wang could easily destroy even a grade 2 puppet, then he was far beyond what they had imagined. Lu Wang, however, seemed utterly indifferent. He continued walking forward calmly, his steps echoing lightly as if the chaos around him meant nothing. He understood the true secret of the puppets. Their weakness lay in their cores. A single touch at the right place was enough to destroy them. To him, dismantling these machines was no different from clearing clutter out of his way. One after another, he reduced them to wreckage. Their twisted metal bodies littered the floor, but Lu Wang's expression remained unchanged. Eventually, with nothing left to hinder him, he walked straight toward the exit door without so much as a backward glance. In another part of the facility, one of the examiners sat in disbelief. Reports flooded in, claiming that their newly acquired grade 2 mechanical puppets had all malfunctioned. His brows furrowed as he considered the impossibility of it. After all, these participants were nothing but children who had only just reached rank 1. There was no way they could have destroyed machines of that caliber. Yet the truth stared back at him in wreckage. As Lu Wang exited the first gate, he misinterpreted the examiner standing nearby, mistaking him for the gatekeeper of the second trial. Preparing himself for another battle, Luang launched forward, combining the technique of cloud-chasing steps with the devastating force of his sevenfold, stellar impact. His eyes gleamed with anticipation, certain that this so-called gatekeeper would not disappoint him. The examiner, still reeling in confusion, barely had time to react. His heart skipped as Luang charged, a storm of force heading straight toward him. Meanwhile, inside the monitoring room, a quiet tension filled the air. A young woman named Dong Kinku sat before a wall of monitors, her long gray hair cascading over her shoulders. She wore a black skirt uniform paired with a crimson polo beneath, her legs covered in sleek black stockings. Her eyes, sharp with concentration, scanned every movement on the screen, while her fingers danced across the keyboard. Her focus, however, was broken when the door opened, and a man strolled in casually. With green hair and a loud yellow shirt, he carried a steaming cup of coffee in one hand while humming cheerfully to himself. "Kinku, you're already here?" he asked in a light tone. Her eyes narrowed in irritation. "Major Qin Sheon," she replied coldly. "I told you not to call me by name." He chuckled, raising his free hand in mock surrender. All right, Lieutenant Colonel Dong Kinku, it is. Good. Now, stop fooling around and come review these materials," she ordered, her voice firm. Qin Sheon obeyed, leaning over her shoulder to observe the monitors. His playful demeanor gave way to curiosity as he asked about the quality of this year's participants in the Prodigy training camp, with a weary sigh. Kinku rubbed her forehead before answering. "No matter how I look at it, only 8 of them truly meet the standard. All of them are official martial artists whose gifts have already awakened." Qin Sheon leaned back in his chair, casually sipping his coffee while his eyes scanned the screens. These 5 here," he muttered, pointing lazily at the monitors. "They're just ordinary. Their gifts are all strength. But these 3, interesting. One agility type, one defense type." His eyes suddenly lit up as he straightened. "And her? That girl, she has psychic ability." Kinku nodded gravely. "She's the most exceptional of all the participants. Her name is Zeim. She's only 15 years and 6 months old. Her psychic gift awakened less than 2 years ago, and she's already close to reaching the standard of a rank 1 mentalist. On top of that, she's equally talented in martial arts and is nearly rank 2. Qin Sheon let out a low whistle, impressed. "Remarkable. This Zeim might just be the brightest talent I've seen since you, Kinku. She reminds me of how much of a genius you were when you joined." "Enough nonsense." Kinku cut him off, her tone sharp. "I'll be listing Zeim as the primary target for this year's training camp." As Qin Sheon chuckled and pressed a few buttons on the console, his amusement turned into shock. He froze mid-motion, his eyes widening as he nearly spilled his coffee all over the controls. "What in the world?" he muttered. Kinku turned quickly toward the monitor, her eyes widening in disbelief. Her mouth fell slightly open as she, too, saw what had just appeared on the screen. Meanwhile, inside the vast assessment hall, the air was thick with tension. A loud crash echoed as a mechanized puppet was violently hurled against the wall, its metal frame crumpling from the force of psychic energy. Standing at the center of the hall was Zia Lin, her eyes glowing faintly as invisible waves of power radiated from her. She had just unleashed her psychic ability with precision, reducing the puppet to little more than twisted scrap. But before she could catch her breath, her senses sharpened. A ripple of danger spread across the walls of the hall. Something foreign, powerful, and dangerous lurked nearby. The aura was heavy, unmistakably belonging to someone who possessed at least rank 3 abilities. Her instincts screamed caution. For a split second she braced herself, ready to counter an attack. Yet, curiously, no strike came. Whoever this person was, they hadn't made a move against her. That fact alone made her assume it must be one of the supervisors quietly monitoring the assessment. When the trial ended, Zia Lin stepped out of the hall, only to be met by an unexpected sight. Outside, armed security stood in formation, their expressions hardened, their weapons drawn, and their eyes fixed on the entrance, as though they were preparing for a deadly battle. The atmosphere was thick with unease. Seeing this sudden commotion, Zia Lin narrowed her eyes. What on earth were they waiting for? Who could make these heavily trained guards look so tense? her curiosity got the better of her. Closing her eyes briefly, she extended her psychic perception past the walls, probing the space beyond. In her mind's eye, she witnessed a startling vision to humans. Not machines, facing off in what seemed like a fight about to explode. Confusion overtook her. That's impossible. All participants are only meant to battle mechanical puppets, not other humans. Among the two figures, one radiated an aura so intense it nearly made her body cease. She felt her heart skip when her eyes finally locked onto the Sorswang. The moment his gaze flickered toward her, even unintentionally, her chest tightened as though she had been pierced. A primal fear surged through her veins. Her feet, instinctively, carried her backward. Trembling, she threw her power outward, slamming the heavy door shut with psychic force. The sudden action startled the nearby guards. They looked at one another, bewildered, not understanding why Xia Lin had reacted in such a terrified manner. Inside, she wrapped her arms around herself, as if bracing against the invisible weight pressing on her chest. Her heart thundered, painfully, each beat gripped by a bolt of fear that refused to let go. Moments later, relief flickered across the guards' faces when Qin, Shayan, and Kinku arrived. The siblings walked with commanding presence, their aura stabilizing the tension. Qin, Shayan, sharp-eyed and stern, immediately asked about the situation and demanded to see the supervisor in charge. One of the guards stepped forward nervously and reported that the surveillance cameras near the entrance had all been destroyed, and worse, communication with the supervisor had been cut off several minutes ago. They were completely blind as to what was happening inside. Qin Shayan clenched his jaw, his tone carrying authority as he ordered one of the guards to compile the list of everyone who had entered the passage. But before the guard could comply, the wall at the entrance rumbled and began to open on its own. Kingu.com, but sharp, lifted her hand slightly and told her brother there was no need. The truth was about to reveal itself. Sweat formed on the guards' brows as they tightened their grip on their weapons, preparing for whatever horror might emerge. The heavy door slid aside. To everyone's surprise, Lucian, a fellow student, walked out first. The guards exhaled in unison, relieved that it was only a candidate. But their relief shattered instantly when Luang appeared behind him, dragging the unconscious supervisor across the floor like discarded prey. The sight made every jaw tighten. The guards froze in disbelief, realizing the boy was not from Q1. Their own region, Kinku, her expression unchanging, but her aura sharp as blades, asked coldly, "Who are you?" Luang casually dropped the supervisor onto the floor. With an almost indifferent smile, he introduced himself as being from Bay City. His words carried no hesitation, no fear, just a plain truth. Qin Shun smirked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You've got some nerve. Wrecking our mechanical puppets, and even beating up the supervising instructor without restraint." Scratched his cheek awkwardly, as though the matter were trivial. He explained that it had all been a misunderstanding. He had thought the supervisor was part of the test itself, and since the supervisor's strength was no joke, he had not held back. Kinku narrowed her eyes, her cold gaze pinning Luang down. Without a word, she released her purple aura, letting it swirl around her like a storm. The pressure in the air grew suffocating, intended to crush Luang's spirit and remind him of the gap between them. Yet Luang stood unmoved, his eyes calm, as if her aura was nothing more than a breeze brushing against him. For a long second, silence stretched. Then, Kinku closed her eyes and withdrew her aura. With measured composure, she spoke. "Congratulations. You have passed the entrance exam." Her finger pointed toward the path ahead. "Go. One of the staff will lead you to your dorms. Get some rest." Still standing near the unconscious supervisor, Luang nodded casually before following the direction given. Once he was out of earshot, Qin Shun exhaled sharply and muttered, "That kid is crazy." He explained that he had already reviewed the recordings, and what he saw unsettled him. Two mechanical puppets reduced to mere toys in Luang's hands. Yet according to the official records, Luang's health status and combat power were far too low to justify such dominance. It shouldn't have been possible. Kinku spoke up, revealing that she herself had assessed him with her psychic energy. But strangely, she sensed nothing. No reaction, no fluctuation, as if her probing simply vanished into an empty void. That fact alone made Luong even more dangerous kin. Cheyenne's brows furrowed as he asked what her plan was for dealing with this monster they had just discovered, but Kinku, still calm, shook her head. I have no plan yet. But one thing is certain, the stats in his file are no longer accurate. He is not who the records say he is. Which means, she paused briefly, her gaze hardening. We must nurture him as a top priority, just like Xian. This year's selection will not be ordinary. Meanwhile, as he walked away, Luong's mind wandered. He thought about Kinku's psychic power, recognizing that hers was at least 5 times stronger than his own. Earlier, he had retracted all his energy completely, suppressing every trace of his aura. Did she discover anything? Or did she only sense a fragment? His thoughts were interrupted when a staff member approached, informing him that it was mealtime. Smiling politely, the staff suggested he eat before heading to the dorms. Luang. Stomach growled in response. Embracing the hunger gnawing inside, he thanked the man, apologizing for the trouble. Then, almost sheepishly, he asked, Can I eat as much as I want? The staff chuckled and assured him that for his first meal, he could eat to his heart's content. Moments later, Luang sat at a table stacked with plates, ordering dishes like a man starved for years. He devoured them relentlessly, each bite disappearing faster than the last. His appetite shocked the others nearby. One student stared at him in disbelief, unable to comprehend how one body could hold so much food. Luang, oblivious, only praised the taste between bites, then promptly ordered another round, 10 more servings. In the midst of his feast, a girl approached. She stood with polite composure, though her eyes revealed a hint of curiosity. Are you Luang? She asked, looking up briefly from his plate. Luang saw her Yang Yuan, the senior sister of someone he had met before. She introduced herself, adding that she too was a representative from Bay City. With a small smile, she reminded him that they had already crossed paths once during the martial artist assessment. Then, gesturing politely, she asked if she could sit with him. But Luang was far more focused on guarding his food. Without giving her permission, he simply stated matter-of-factly, The food's unlimited. You can get more for yourself. Her polite smile twitched, and for a moment her teeth clenched. She wasn't here to eat his food. Why was he acting so defensive? A wave of frustration crossed her mind. But Luang interrupted her train of thought with his next words. By the way, he said, still chewing, the chairman told me Bay City hasn't had a representative for years. What's going on with that? Yang Yuan exhaled and explained patiently. Yes, Bay City sent representatives every year, but none ever managed to pass the entrance assessment. Even when they scraped by, they couldn't gather enough points to remain. In the end, their efforts amounted to nothing but becoming stepping stones for others, an embarrassment no one wanted on their record. Luang paused briefly, puzzled. Points? What points? She explained that points were the internal currency of the training camp. They were essential for survival and growth. Inside, everything: training equipment, instructor consultations, tonics, even dorm lodging required points. Even the meal he was devouring so freely, the monster meat rations, were exclusive military provisions that normally cost points to acquire. Leaning closer, she raised 3 fingers, emphasizing her next words. Right now, there are only 3 people in the entire camp who have earned points. Luang, still chewing, tilted his head. Only 3? How'd they get them? Yang Yuan elaborated. Points could only be earned by passing the brutal tests and special assessments. She listed them one by one. Xiang, a rank 2 gifted martial artist from Ilan City, with the ability of Stone Skin. Then Mang Jin, another, rank 2 martial artist from Donggang City, who possessed a speed-type ability. But when it came to the last person, her tone shifted. She turned her head slightly, as though acknowledging someone's unseen presence. Her voice dropped, carrying, "Wait, the last one is different. Her gift isn't like the others. She's not merely a martial artist, she's a mental. Her psychic power surpasses all, and from what I've heard, Her abilities are the strongest among all participants this year. The name hung heavy in the air. Xia Lin. At that very moment, Xia Lynn herself sensed their conversation. Her psychic perception brushed against them, and her gaze landed on Lu Wang. What she saw nearly froze her blood. Lu Wang, calm as ever, eating without a care, was the same person who had filled her with terror earlier. Her spoon slipped, soup spilling onto the table as her eyes went blank. Her body trembled like a frail old woman. Desperately, she used her power to balance her tray, turning swiftly in an attempt to escape the suffocating presence. But Lu's eyes shifted, landing casually on her. With a faint murmur, he remarked, almost amused, "So that's Xia Lin's ability, huh?" Yang Yuan, blinking at his words, leaned in and asked, "Why too? No Xia Lynn."